Hey, good evening. Well, my parents were born in the city of Baghdad, which is in the country of Iraq, which by the way is not a great vacation destination. In case you're thinking about taking a break this summer, I highly advise you to skip Baghdad, at least for the next couple thousand years till things settle down. But my parents did not raise my brother and I as Muslims. Actually, they raised us as Christians. And the reason is because my people, my ethnic background is called Assyrian. Now, that's not to be confused with Syrian, which is a reference to people from the country Syria, which is a country that exists in the Middle East today. That's a different people group. My people are from the country of Assyria, which is a country that has not existed for 2,700 years. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Assyrian people at some point in your life. Raise your hand. Yeah, a lot of you have, yeah. Chances are, if you've read any parts of the Old Testament, you'll recall the Assyrians are talked a lot about in the Old Testament, right? Which sounds pretty cool. Until you realize we were the sworn enemies of Israel, so consequently that made us the sworn enemies of God. So that was kind of a bummer growing up and finding that out. But with a lot of therapy and counseling, you get over these kind of emotional things. But enough about my problems. Let's talk about the subject of relativism. The first 200 or so years in the United States, Christians were viewed by non-Christians as simply being irrational people. Like, oh, those are the guys that believe in talking snakes and other kinds of ridiculous things. But in about the last 20 or so years, there's been a shift in the attitude towards Christians, and people no longer consider Christians as merely irrational, but also as immoral and dangerous. Now, the reason why they think we're immoral is because we often make assessments, we make judgments about other kinds of behaviors or other kinds of ideas. Like we might say, we think abortion is wrong, or we think homosexual sex is wrong, or we think Islam is false. And because we're making these assessments saying that these other people are mistaken or wrong, therefore we're called immoral. Now, we're called dangerous because we teach exclusivism, which is the idea that we think that we're correct about our convictions. And if we're correct about our convictions, then by logical deduction, someone who holds a different view would be incorrect. And so we make an exclusivistic claim. And this kind of exclusivism is dangerous, because think about it. What has Islamic exclusivism brought our world? It's brought terrorism, right? And so we Christians are dangerous, just like Muslims in that case. In fact, you may have heard of Rosie O'Donnell, a well-known lesbian comedian in our current culture. She said on television, radical Christianity is just as threatening as radical Islam in a country like America. Now you might be thinking, well, Al, I'm not a radical Christian. Well, by radical Christian, she just means anyone who thinks and acts as if what Jesus said was legit and lives consistently with it. Well, that would be a radical Christian. Bill Maher, well-known, also comedian, television personality. He hosts a show currently called Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, very, very well-known show. He says, look, organized religion is dangerous and a mass psychosis. He says evangelical Christians are usually the ones who are behind everything that represents intolerance and bigotry. And again, when you hear him say evangelical Christians, even if you're like, well, I'm not necessarily an evangelical, I'm this kind of a Christian. The point he's making there by evangelical is simply, again, Christians who actually believe what the Bible teaches. Okay, this is what he means by that. And then Andrew Sullivan, who it may not be as familiar to you, but this is a guy who brought all the marriage lawsuits that eventually helped to legalize same-sex marriage in the United States. This is the intellectual force behind that. And he says religion and religious certainty is the problem. So religious certainty, believing that you are correct and having confidence in that, that's the problem, he says. When the presidents of the United States and of Iran speak as much about God as about diplomacy, we have entered a new, dangerous era. Okay? So all these people here are arguing that Christianity and Christians are immoral and dangerous. And the culture thinks this is the case. I'm just giving you, of course, a snapshot of what a lot of people believe. But they think this is the case, I would argue, because they've adopted the most common philosophy of thinking in the United States and in the West in general today. And that philosophy of thinking is known as relativism. Now, in order for me to unpack and explain what is relativism and for you to be able to understand it, I have to explain to you two kinds of ways that something can be true. I have to explain to you two kinds of ways that something can be true. And perhaps the best way I can do that is by sharing with you a personal story that actually I've never shared before in public. And it's about something that I would argue has changed my life, apart from Christ, more than anything else. And I was hesitant about sharing it with you. I talked to my wife about it, and she said, it's fine. I don't think this is probably going to go farther than this church here. But it's something that's impacted me in amazing ways. It's ice cream. Ice cream has just been one of those things that has just been so transformational in my life. It is incredible. And chocolate peanut butter ice cream, I would argue, is the best ice cream on planet Earth, okay? Now, I suspect there might be some people here who have a different personal favorite flavor of ice cream. Is there anyone here who's bold enough to raise their hand and share with me? I think I saw your hand. You said you were even willing to be an object of derision and scorn here. So feel free. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Vanilla. Well, now that's a self-inflicted wound. Okay, Okay, vanilla. Whatever. Now, all right. So let me ask you a question. Would it make any sense for me to say that his personal favorite flavor of ice cream, vanilla, is wrong? Can he be wrong about that? I think we have some strong opinions here. Okay. But I saw a lot of you shaking your head saying, no, he can't be wrong. And I understand the reason why you're probably thinking that. Because when it comes to ice cream, you just pick what you like, right? When it comes to your favorite flavor of ice cream, you just pick what you like. Now, you could like vanilla as your favorite flavor of ice cream, and I could like chocolate peanut butter ice cream, and we're both right. And the reason is because this kind of claim is what we call a subjective truth claim. And when you think of the word subjective, just think it's about the subject. It's about me, or it's about him, expressing our personal preference. And so when it comes to personal preferences, it's okay if we disagree about something. We're both right, even though our views are contradictory. So the statement, chocolate peanut butter ice cream is the best ice cream, is true when I say it, but false when he says it. So subjective truth claims can be true and false at the same time, depending upon the subject who's expressing it. Okay? Now that's very unique to subjective truth claims. But suppose I was to probably have too much ice cream and over time develop diabetes, and I go to a doctor and the doctor says to me, Alan, let me tell you something. Insulin is a medicine that can help you to control diabetes. Now, would it make any sense for me to say to that guy, hey, doc, look, I appreciate you have a degree in medicine. I'm sure you're board certified in family practice. I get it, okay? But honestly, the statement, insulin's a medicine that helps control diabetes, look, that's just true for you. But it's not true for me, okay? That might be your truth, but I think probably what would help me the most is to have maybe an apple pie, okay? Now, notice, it doesn't make sense to say that about that kind of statement, because this kind of statement is a different kind of statement. It's an objective truth claim. In other words, it's not about me, the subject, expressing my personal preference. Rather, it's about an object, something out there, something external to me, that is insulin. And the statement is about that thing, insulin, out there. And if that statement is true, then it's true for everyone. And if that statement happened to be false, it would be false for everyone because it's not a subjective truth claim. It's a claim about something external to all of us, and therefore it has sort of an objective reality. It just stands on its own. It just either is true or it's not true. In this case, I think we'd all agree that that statement is true. Okay? So that's a difference between subjective truth claims and objective truth claims. When it comes to medicine, right, you can't just pick what you like. You have to choose what heals, what's true. Right? Now, before we take a test, that's right, we are going to take a test. I'm going to give you a chance to review this because I want you to make sure you get this idea down, the difference between these two kinds of claims. All right? So, quick review. Subjective truth claims are claims that express a person's subjective preference, their opinion, their personal opinion, okay, about what they prefer. Objective truth claims express claims about an object. And to be honest with you, it doesn't have to be a physical object. It could even be something like a principle, like justice, right? If you're trying to figure out what is justice, notice that's not a matter of personal preference. Justice has a definition. You just have to figure out what the definition is. So when I say object, don't think just physical. What I mean by object is something external to us. Okay? Subjective truth claims can be true and false at the same time, right? Depending on who's expressing it, because it's a matter of subjective preference. But objective truth claims cannot be true and false at the same time. They're either true for everyone or false for everyone. Okay? Subjective truth claims cannot be third-party tested, right? So if you wanted to know what I or he thinks about his personal favorite flavor of ice cream, there's no like test, or you can't put him in over a Bunsen burner, or in a beaker and centrifuge him. You just ask him, hey, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And he's like, vanilla. Sorry. Enough commentary on that. Okay? But objective truth claims can be third-party tested. In other words, if I was to make the claim that there's a pink elephant out in the parking lot, that's a claim about reality. It's a claim about something external to us. And we could just step outside, go check, look at the parking lot, notice there's no pink elephant. Alan's lost his marbles, right? So that is something that can be tested, right? And here's probably the key defining characteristic between a subjective and objective truth claim. Changing your opinion about a subjective truth claim changes the truth about it, right? So if he was to come to his senses and say, yeah, you know what? Okay, mint chocolate chip ice cream's the best, right? Well, notice, by changing his opinion, now the truth of the statement, vanilla is the best ice cream, has now become false, right? So subjective truth claims, when you can tell they're subjective, because when you change your opinion about the matter, it changes the truth value of that statement. But objective truth claims, doesn't matter what your opinion is. Doesn't matter if you change it. Okay? I could go from thinking that doctor who told me that insulin is a medicine that controls diabetes, right? I could think that statement is false. And then a month later, go and start believing that the statement is true, or change my opinion about it and think, oh, no, I think he's right about it. But now, has the statement changed at all? Insulin helps control diabetes. Has that statement become more true simply because my opinion about it changed? No, it's irrelevant, right? Facts don't care about our feelings or our opinions. Right? Finally, just a random example, I love Marvel movies is a subjective truth claim. It's a claim about my personal preference. Okay, you could say, well, I love DC movies, But if I was to say, well, Marvel has made 142 movies, now notice that's different. It's still about Marvel, the company that makes movies, but now I'm making a claim about objective reality. I'm saying they've made 142 movies. Now, that statement, by the way, is false. They haven't made 142 movies. They've probably made less than 60, in fact. But notice, even though the sentence itself is false, even though it's not true they made 142, the claim itself is still an objective truth claim because it's a claim about reality, this company that makes movies. So don't think if it's true or false, that's what determines whether it's objective or subjective. No. All right, so far so good. Are we ready to take a test? Okay. This will determine, what your insurance rates are on your house next year. Okay, so just no pressure. Right? All right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to present a number of sentences on the screen. And if you think the sentence is it a subjective truth claim, I want you to all shout ice cream. But if you think that the claim is an objective truth claim, I want you to shout insolent. Okay, so the only thing I'm going to hear out of your voices is ice cream or insolent. So far, so good? All right. Let's try a couple easy ones to just kind of get the juices flowing, all right? Disneyland has 53 attractions. Ice cream or insulin? Okay, insulin, and I agree, it is. It's like, now, let's just say we didn't know. Is it 52? Is it 80? Well, let's say we don't know. I have no idea. I just made up that number. But it's still an objective truth claim because it's a claim about reality. And even if we didn't know the answer, or even if we couldn't know the answer, like, let's say I was to say there are, 8 trillion stars in the universe. Okay. Well, how can we know? We'll probably never know in our lifetimes. But it's still an objective claim because it's a claim about reality. Okay. Very good. All right, how about this? I like Toyota more than Nissan. Ice cream. Okay, very good. Yeah, it's a personal preference. Now, if I said Toyota makes more cars than Nissan, well, now it's going to be an insolent claim. Yeah, exactly, because it's a claim about reality, right? I can bench press 315 pounds. Wow. Talking about church warmth right there. That's so loved at this place. Holy cow. I didn't even hear an answer in the other category. Okay, yeah, it's an insolent claim. That's right. It's not a matter of personal preference. It's not just that I wish I could bench 315 pounds. Although if we were to put a bench up here and put it at 315 pounds, I can bench 315 pounds. Now, you might be skeptical because you're looking at me and thinking, man, this guy is so scrawny. But the reality is, if I flexed right now, my muscles would just tear right out of my shirt, okay? But we're in church, and I want to be modest, and I want to show up any of the guys here, so. The chairs in this room feel comfortable. Okay, yeah, very good. All right, so enough of the easy stuff. Let's get to some of the more pressing subjects here. And don't feel bad if you get this wrong. Keep in mind, relativism is the philosophy of thinking that our culture operates in, like every part of it. And we as Christians just swim in it every day. So if you find yourself being like, what? No way. It's okay, all right? We've all been there, all right? So slavery is wrong. Ice cream or insulin? Oh, okay. See, now it's getting interesting. Who's the guy who said false? I can't weigh 130. Bench there. No, I'm kidding. Okay, I'm going to argue this is an insolent type of claim, okay? Why? Because I'm not saying I like slavery or I prefer to own slaves or I don't prefer to. It's not about my personal preference. What is the claim about? It's about slavery, this idea, this thing that's out there, okay? And my claim is that this thing, slavery, it's wrong, all right? And so notice, it's a claim about external reality. It's not a claim about my personal preference. And so for that reason, it would be under the insolent claim. Now, even if there was a person who's a slavery advocate on stage with me, they would too agree, even though they might say that statement is false, they would still agree that that statement is a claim about slavery, okay? Notice, there's nothing in that sentence that is expressing what I like or don't like, okay? God does not exist. Yeah, very good. Insolent, that's right. It's an insolent claim because it's a claim about reality. It's saying this idea that there's a God out there, no, he doesn't exist, okay? Now, of course, many of us, I'm assuming a lot of us here are Christians, and we would disagree with the statement, but it's still a claim about reality, and we would just say, no, it's an objective truth claim. It's false, but it's a claim about reality, okay? The Bible is my favorite book. Okay, ice cream, that's right, yeah. Jesus is the only way to God, so Jews and Muslims are mistaken. I heard mostly insulin, okay, so that's good. I think you're kind of getting the idea here. That's right, it's an insolent claim. Again, what we're saying is, we're not saying that I hope Jesus is the only way, or I like Jesus to be the only way. We're saying that this man in history, Jesus of Nazareth, okay, he claimed to be the only way to God, and we think that's true. We think that's true. That's the claim. Okay? So it's not a matter of personal preference. It's a claim about him. Now, you might say, if you disagree with that, no, that's not true. He's not the only way. You can get to heaven through Buddha or whatever, But still, the claim is an objective claim. It's a claim about external reality. Therefore, it would be an objective truth claim. It's an insolent claim. It's okay to cheat on tests. Ice cream. Insolent. Yeah, it's also an insolent claim, okay? Because again, I probably should have phrased it a little bit differently because it makes it sound like I'm saying, yeah, I like cheating on tests. If I said that, that would be an ice cream claim. But I'm saying it's morally permissible to cheat on tests. So cheating, this thing that's out there, it's okay. Cheating's okay. That's what we're saying. It's external reality. It's not a matter of personal preference, okay? So, all right, very good. I'm going to give you an A-, okay? So your insurance rates are staying low. Carry on. That's great, all right? You did a great job. Here's the point. Relativism, at its core, treats everything like a subjective truth claim. That's what relativism is. It says whatever we're talking about, we're going to treat it like it's an ice cream type of claim. We're going to treat it like you just pick what you like. And so consequently, things like knowledge and truth and morality aren't things that exist out there outside of us. Rather, they're all inside of our hearts, right? They're all just a matter of our own personal preference. And so you end up being the arbiter of what is true because what we have knowledge about, what we know to be true, what we like and don't like, what we prefer, or morality, it's all here. It's not out there, it's all here inside, okay? And this is the whole idea that everything becomes true for you because they're just denying objective reality, all right? That's what relativism is at its core, treating everything like a subjective truth claim. Alan Bloom, back in 1987, talked about this. He wrote a great book, The Closing of the American Mind, and listen to what he said. There's one thing a professor can be absolutely sure of. Almost every student entering the university believes, or says he believes, that truth is relative. Okay? Now, you might think, well, Alan, that's just some academic, speaking in kind of this university setting. But is that really the case? Like, do people actually think that truth is relative to individual personal preferences? I want to show you a video that gives the answer as yes, okay? So this is a video of a white guy going around a university campus and asking students what I would believe are some very basic questions. And I want you to see how they answer these questions. Take a look.
If I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you. Okay, yeah.
Nice to meet you. I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
if you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like, that's wrong to believe in it, because, I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You. Sure.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
Yes.
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
So 2 things that I want to comment about to this video. Number 1 is notice the way they respond to him when he makes these ridiculous claims is, well, if that's how you feel inside, if that feels true for you, if that's kind of how you identify, then that's okay. Then you are that thing, which clearly he isn't, right? And the second thing, notice, they have a hard time saying he's wrong, right? They have a hard time saying that he's mistaken. Again, this is relativism, because remember, relativism says there isn't this like standard of morals that's out there that we can look at and be like, oh, that's not the case. Or there isn't this set of facts that's out there that we can all look at and agree. All that has gone from objective to subjective. It's all being brought inside of our hearts and however we feel. Okay. Now, by the way, this sort of question that this guy asks, you might think, well, this is also just kind of hypothetical. They're asking this as students, but in reality, nobody actually makes these kinds of claims that they believe they're of a different race or of a different age. Well, that might have been the case maybe 10 years ago, but today this is happening quite often. In fact, you may have heard of Rachel Dolezal, okay, 41-year-old female who claimed that she was African American, okay? Now, she was the chapter president of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Color People. She was a chapter president until they figured out, wait, you're not African American. But she maintains that she is. Listen to her own testimony here.
Let me just ask you the question in simple terms again, because you've sent mixed signals over the years. Are you an African American woman?
I identify as black.
I identify as black. Well, that's interesting because this is a picture of her when she was a kid. She's an Eastern European girl. She's white, okay? There's no mistaking. That's who she is. But it doesn't matter what external reality is, right? It doesn't matter what's out there, what's real. What matters is what's in your heart, how you feel inside. And if you identify as black, then you can believe that you're black, right? Here's another example. Emil Radelman, who's a Dutch television personality. At the time of this particular incident, he was 68 years old. But he says, I don't identify as 68. I identify as 49. I feel so healthy. I feel so much youth in me. I feel like I'm 49. And so he petitioned to have the courts change his legal age to be 49. Look at his rationale. Listen up.
And I feel I suffer under my age because I'm much more younger than my 68. So when I ask for a mortgage, for example, they say it's impossible. If I go on Tinder, then I get women from 68, 69, when the women are there. And when I'm on Tinder, then they say, okay, then you can lie for your age. You say you're 49. I don't want to lie. I want to be myself. So don't force me to lie. But when I'm really 49 again, I will have a baby again. I will buy a new car again. I will paint my house again. I'm going outside and I invest my money again. Because now I'm old man, I have to save my money to give to my kids so they can live. But if I have that age again, I have hope again. I'm new again. And the whole future is there for me again.
Where's the meteor that's going to hit the earth and just end this all? Okay, so he thinks he identifies as 49. So what are people saying? Well, just look, when you go on a dating website or dating app, just lie and say you're 49. He's like, oh, no. I don't want to lie. I want the courts to change my age, which would then what? Not make it a lie? I mean, it's amazing, right? That he thinks this way. But again, what has happened? Well, we've completely swallowed the poison pill of relativism, right? We've abandoned the idea that there can be knowledge and truth that exists out there that's open to investigation and identification, and we've brought all of those claims inside here, inside our hearts, right? In fact, there's a book written by a guy named Carl Trueman called The Rise and the Triumph of the Modern Self. If you want to really understand how it is that we got to this point in our culture today where someone can seriously claim that though he's 68, he identifies as 49, or someone who's ethnically white can identify as black, and how that kind of claim is actually meaningful and believed to be legitimate, how do we come to this book by Carl Trueman explains it, okay? And basically what's happened is that we have come to a place in society where we now give complete and total authority to our inner feelings, to our inner emotions. And so our inner beliefs and our inner emotions are what then defines external reality, okay? And that's why, although I'm not going to be talking about this, for people who identify as transgender, if they identify a certain way inside, what they try to do is make physical reality match up to their internal states, okay? But it's the same kind of thing as this, okay? They're basically giving total authority to their inner states, right? Now, what obviously you can tell here is that the world is deeply confused about the nature of truth. And relativism is like the opposite of that, right? Ironically, Pilate asked Jesus, right, 2,000 years ago during the trial, he says, "What is truth?" Now, Pilate didn't stand around and wait for the answer, right? The narrative just kind of continues and moves on. He didn't stick around with the answer. So let's just define truth once and for all. And Pilate, if you're listening, pay attention, okay? I think Aristotle said it best when he described truth. It's called the correspondence theory of truth, right? This might sound a little technical, but bear with me for a moment. Here's what he says. If you say that it is and it is, or you say that it isn't and it isn't, that's true. If you say that it isn't and it is, or you say that it is and it isn't, that's false. Now, this is why we're not advertising a degree in philosophy today, right? Because philosophers, I love them dearly, many of them are my friends, okay? Like, why do they have to be so complicated, right? So let me just rephrase this so that it makes more sense, okay? The correspondence theory of truth is this. Truth is what corresponds to reality. That's basically what Aristotle is saying. Truth is what corresponds to reality, okay? And here's what that looks like. If I say I have a full tank of gas in my car, and I go out to the parking lot and I look at my car, and it turns out that the gauge says full, then guess what? My claim corresponds to reality. Therefore, my statement's true. Wow, amazing, right? But if I go outside and my gas tank is empty, then notice my statement, I have a full tank of gas in my car, does not correspond to reality. So therefore, my statement is false. Okay? That's the correspondence theory of truth. That's what truth is. Truth is what corresponds to reality, right? But what's happened with relativism is we've taken reality, that thing that's out there outside of our personal opinions, and we've turned it and made it to be what's inside of our hearts, what we feel, okay? And by the way, I would argue that even that this theory of truth is self-evident, and I would argue it's universally accepted. Now, I know people are like, oh, but Alan, that's just Western truth. That's just Western logic. Like the Hindu in India, he doesn't believe that. And I completely disagree, right? Because the Hindu, before he crosses the road, you know what he does? He looks both ways. Why? Because he wants to know whether his belief that there is no truck barreling down the road corresponds to reality, right? When he takes a white pill, he wants to know, is this white pill better be aspirin and not arsenic? And that belief needs to match up with reality, okay? So I would say this is a universally accepted principle, even though many people might be tempted to say, no, that's just Western logic, okay? So the problem, though, is that even though this correspondence theory of truth seems self-evident and obviously true. People follow it for everyday kind of going about their lives. But when it comes to morality or when it comes to religion, that theory gets thrown out the door. Or today, if it pertains to identity, then of course it definitely gets thrown out the door, okay? And that's because people don't believe that you can have knowledge or truth when it comes to morality or when it comes to religion. They believe that morals and religion are not things that are out there that we can come to know, but rather they're only things inside here that we feel and prefer, okay? And that's why I think some of us were tempted during that test to say something like, well, that's just an ice cream claim when I was saying that something was wrong. Because we've just been swimming in this culture that wants to say when it comes to right and wrong, it's up to each person to decide for themselves, right? And we kind of slip into buying into that idea, right? So when it comes to morals or religion, basically people are treating all of these like ice cream claims, like preferences for ice cream, all right? And so they think that religion and morality are not based in objective reality, but based on subjective truth claims. So, for example, if you were to apply this philosophy of relativism to morality, you would get what we call moral relativism. That's just a fancy term for saying that morals don't exist out there in the world, and we have to figure them out, like do not do this and do this, you know. Rather, those things now exist in each person's heart, right? So when it comes to, for example, sex before marriage, you know, you might say sex before marriage is wrong. I might say sex before marriage is right. And guess what? We're both correct. Because morals aren't out there. There's no moral rule that says don't have sex with someone you're not married to. That doesn't exist according to relativism. Rather, that's just in your heart, and in my heart there's a different version of that. Or maybe when it comes to, you know, cheating on taxes. You might think that's wrong. I might think that's right. And we're both right. Because it's a subjective truth claim, you know. In the book Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck puts into the mouth of Reverend Jim Casey this perfect expression of moral relativism. He says, there ain't no sin and there ain't no virtue. There's just stuff people do. It's all part of the same thing. And some of the things folks do is nice and some ain't nice, but that's as far as any man got a right to say. Okay? That perfectly captures relativism, right? You can't say it's right. You can't say it's wrong. Right? It's just people doing things, right? And it's certainly not the case that anyone can point to another person and say, hey, that's wrong. The only way you can point to something and say to someone, hey, what you're doing is wrong, is if there's this thing that says, do not do X, and that person's doing X, you say, hey, you're doing that thing that's wrong. But remember, they don't believe that that thing exists. That do not do or do is all inside our hearts, right? So that's why it's okay. And so people say things like, and I'm sure you've heard this in culture for decades now, what's right and wrong is up to me, to each his own. Don't force your morals on me. You shouldn't judge other people. Every one of these sentences is an expression of moral relativism because morality does not exist out there, it exists in here. And that's why they'll say, don't force your morals on me. It'd be like me forcing chocolate peanut butter ice cream on you. Hey, you gotta like it. So stop liking vanilla, it's so boring. Try Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs makes great chocolate peanut butter. You gotta like it. And you're like, why are you forcing your favorite flavor of ice cream on me? And that's what they mean when they say don't force your morals on me, because morals are like preferences in ice cream. And so I might think that sex before marriage is wrong, and I'm trying to impose it on somebody. They're like, stop it. Stop forcing it. It's just a personal preference. That's how they see it, and that's why they say those kinds of things. Barna poll back in 2015 asked a bunch of people, but one of the groups was practicing Christians, whether they believed that morality was objective or subjective, okay? And they use the words absolute, but that's what they mean is objective. What do we see? Only 59% said that yes, it's objective, which means 41% either had never thought about it or think, no, it's not objective, okay? Again, this is practicing Christians. So what we're seeing is, like I said, Christians are adopting some of the ideas of the world and buying into this moral relativism. Religious pluralism is another expression of relativism, but this is when you apply relativism to religious belief, right? And the idea is, hey, when it comes to picking a religion, just pick what you like, Wiccan, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, doesn't matter. It's just like picking your favorite flavor of ice cream. Pick what you like. And it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong, just like there's no right or wrong which flavor of ice cream you pick. People say all roads lead to Rome, all paths lead to God, different strokes for different folks. I always get told by people, they're like, oh, Alan, you found Jesus to be true for you? Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, that's so precious. I'm glad he's true for you, but he's not true for me, So don't force your Jesus on me. Right? That's, again, an expression of religious pluralism. Because, again, there's no one religion out there that's correct, and we have to figure out what it is. That would presume that religious belief is something that has some objective basis. No, of course not. What religion you choose is what's inside of here. And a Pew Research poll also looked at how many people believe that their religious beliefs are the one true religion. And, they looked at mainline Christian denominations, evangelical denominations, whatever. But basically with the evangelical camp, which is broadly what we are here, right? Only 41% said my religion is the one true faith, right? 59% were saying, no, other religions are also true, right? And so, I'd expect that coming from secular culture, but the problem is that the church has become infected with this poisonous thinking of relativism. And it's affecting their beliefs about morality, and it's affecting their beliefs about religious convictions, right? And the problem is this. We know ideas have consequences, right? Ideas have consequences. And guess what? Bad ideas have what? Victims. Bad ideas have victims, okay? In fact, there's a phrase in German, pardon me for those of you who speak German, and I'm going to butcher this phrase, lebenswertes Leben, which means life unworthy of life. This phrase was part of the platform of the Third Reich. And it was an idea that justified the killing of 6 million Jews and another 11 million people during World War II, right? It justified the Holocaust. Why? Because ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have victims. And so we cannot think that the church can buy into the idea of relativism and somehow have no, ill effect in the church. That's crazy talk. In fact, let me just mention 2 consequences of the church buying into relativism. The first consequence is that it undermines sin and the gospel. Buying into relativism undermines sin and the gospel, and let me explain to you how that's the case. As Christians, we believe there's a God, and this God has created a standard of morality that is out there. It's objective. It's not in our hearts. It's out there, right? It's objective morality. And when we break those rules, when we commit crimes against God, well, then we've committed sin. And if we've committed sin, well, then we're guilty. And if we're guilty, we deserve to be punished, but the only way to avoid that punishment is to get a pardon. And how do we get a pardon? Well, it's through Jesus, right? So notice, only when you presuppose that there's some standard of morality that we've violated does it make any sense to eventually need Christ. So what does relativism say? Well, it says this thing at the bottom here, objective morality, does not exist, right? There's no objective standard of morality. It's not out there. It's in here. It's in my heart. And so if what's right and wrong is up to each person, and each person decides for themselves what's right and wrong, well then, there's no objective standard of morality. You can't commit a sin, and if you haven't committed a sin, well then you're not guilty. And if you're not guilty, well then you don't need a pardon. And if you don't need a pardon, guess who else you don't need? Jesus, right? So this is why relativism undermines the gospel. In fact, if you've ever read the book of Judges, fascinating book, right? Because you see the Israelites, in a situation where they try to follow after God, but they fail miserably, and then God brings in a judge, and they kind of repent, and they start to follow after God, and they kind of repeat the cycle over and over and over again. And the very last verse of Judges says this: in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's moral relativism, right? Because when there's no king, there's no standard of morality. And so people just do whatever they want. And if there's no God, there's no standard of morality, right? Now, of course, we Christians believe in God, but the reality is that many of us are acting like functional atheists because we've taken right and wrong and brought it inside here, inside our hearts, right? I love what C.S. Lewis says about this. He says, it is after you've realized that there is a moral law and that there's a power behind that moral law and that you have broken that law and put yourself wrong with that power, it is after this and not a moment sooner that Christianity begins to talk. That is so true. If you don't think that you've done anything wrong and that there's someone who's going to hold you accountable to that, why would you ever need Jesus? And that's precisely his point. And so since relativism undermines that basic premise of realizing there's a moral law and that you've broken it, of course it makes sense that you wouldn't need Jesus. So that's the first consequence of the church adopting relativism, is it undermines sin in the gospel. The second consequence is that it undermines the mission of the church, right? We all know the very famous passage where Jesus says in Matthew 28:19, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teaching them all that are commanded, so on and so forth, right? It's a great commission. But if relativism is true, right? If there's no one true religion, but anyone can be any religion, then what's the motivation then to go and preach the gospel? Why tell people about Jesus if he's not the only way, right? They could be whatever they want to be. Just pick whatever flavor you like, and you're good to go. Why make disciples of all nations? In fact, Lifeway Study recently asked, in the past 6 months, how many times have you shared with somebody how to become a Christian? The vast majority, 55%, 0 times. Now, can I say, well, it's because they don't believe in, that their faith is true? I don't know, but that's certainly a disappointing statistic, right? My suspicion is that, there's something to be said about the fact that there's also a large percentage of these Christians who don't think that Christianity is the only true religion, right? But we know that Jesus said something very particular about the nature of truth. John 14:6, very famous passage. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. That's Jesus in a nutshell saying religious pluralism is false. Notice, he didn't say, I am one way, one truth, one possible life. You can come to the Father through me or someone else. Live and be whatever you like. As long as you're sincere, you do you. I'm cool with that. That's not what he said, right? But that's kind of the way people are thinking. So in our last 5 minutes here, what I want to do is just share with you a brief tactic that will help you to address relativism either as moral relativism or as religious pluralism. And this tactic is called taking the roof off. You already know this tactic, okay? I'm just going to outline it for you and show you how it can apply to this particular subject. It's known in Latin as reductio ad absurdum. Does anybody know what that means? Reductio. Any homeschoolers here? Take Latin. Yes, reduce the absurd. Okay, maybe not a homeschooler, but okay. Yes, reduce the absurdity. And so basically this approach, this tactic, takes advantage of the fact that some views have absurd consequences. And if a view or if a position leads to some absurdity, we can reject the view. That's the way it works. And so the way there's 3 steps to it. First step, adopt the other person's view. So when you hear someone express this view, any view, okay, just first ask the question, okay, suppose what you're saying is true. You know how sometimes you say that? Yeah, let's just say what you're saying is true, okay? Then the second step is to follow their view to its logical and possibly absurd conclusion. So you say, okay, let's just say what you're saying is true, Mr. or Mrs. whatever. Now, if what you're saying is true, what logically follows? Does your view lead logically to some ridiculous or absurd situation or consequence? If it does, then you know that their view can also be rejected, right? So once you kind of have taken their view for a test drive to see what it leads to, then you can then ask a question, and here's a point, that graciously exposes the absurdity of their view. That would be the third step. So once you discover their view leads to an absurdity, ask a question that exposes that. Now again, I believe you all already know this view, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. Imagine the hypothetical conversation a father has with his daughter. The daughter has just started to take up smoking, okay? And the dad says, honey, come on, why did you start smoking? And she says, well, because all my friends were doing it. Now, what's the father going to say in response to that? Exactly. If all your friends jumped off a cliff, would you do that too? See, you already knew the answer, right? What is he doing? He's taking the roof off. He's doing a reductio ad absurdum. Notice what he does. He first takes the first step, which is to adopt his daughter's view. What's his daughter's view? Well, if her friends do something, she'll do the same thing. So he says, okay, that's her view. Let's take that view for a test drive. Well, that would mean that if her friends jumped off a cliff, she would jump off a cliff. Wait, that's absurd. That's right. And so is the view that led to the absurdity. Okay? In fact, Jesus used this same tactic in the Gospels. Matthew 12, Jesus just healed a demon-possessed man. Okay, so that's the context. And then this passage comes up. When the Pharisees heard this, that Jesus had done this exorcism, they said, this man cast out demons only by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons. And knowing their thoughts, Jesus said to them, well, any kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and any city or house divided against itself will not stand. And if Satan casts out Satan, he's divided against himself. How then shall his kingdom stand? So notice what Jesus says. He says, look, you think I'm the ruler of the demons casting out other demons? And so he gives this illustration. It's like, okay, imagine there's two, armies that are set out against each other. But one army, instead of attacking the enemy army, turns on itself and attacks itself. Well, that would, of course, destroy this army. And this one that's just sitting around watching would win. And Jesus says, that's my point. He's like, you think I'm destroying other demons? If that was the case, Satan's entire kingdom would be destroyed. But Satan's kingdom is doing just fine. Do you see how absurd that is? That's right. And so is the Pharisees' view that Jesus is Beelzebub. So you see, Jesus even went to our website, learned this tactic, and then used it with the Pharisees of the day. Just kidding. It was Peter who went and told them. Okay? Yeah, Abraham Lincoln did that. It's right. He's done as well. So, for example, people say, well, I can't believe the Bible if it was written by men. Okay, so let's take their view for just a moment. If it's written by men, I can't believe it. Okay, let's take that view for a test drive. Can anyone think of any absurdity that might result from adopting that view? Can you think of anything that's written by men that you might believe? Wow, we're a skeptical culture here. What? The Constitution, right? The driver's manual. I don't know, your science textbook. I mean, right, there's all kinds of things written by people. If you were to just reject those just because they're written by people, well, that's absurd. That's right. So is the rationale that led to the absurdity, right? So, anyways, I'm not going to go into a bunch of examples of this, but let's just take moral relativism, right? This is the view, we've already talked about this, that morals are relative. They're not up there existing in the universe, but rather in your heart. What's right and wrong is up to you. Okay, let's take the roof off of that. If someone expresses that view to you, and you say, okay, let's just say you're right, that what's right and wrong is up to each person. Can anybody think of anything that might demonstrate how that leads to an absurdity? What could you possibly say? What's that? Okay, yeah, murder. Yeah, I could punch you in the face or kill you, and if you want to get really extreme. Wow, it's intense. I wouldn't go with murder, but okay. But I could punch you, and that would be right for me. It might be wrong for you, but hey, don't impose your morals on me. That's absurd. That's right. And so is the idea that what's right and wrong is up to each person. I remember years ago, there's this Catholic priest who was debating an abortion rights activist female, and during the debate, she made the claim, you shouldn't force your morals on women. So you shouldn't force your morals on women and of course, in general, on other people. So he steps away from his podium, walks over to her podium, grabs her purse and starts to rustle through it. She's like, what are you doing? He's like, going through your purse. You can't do that. Oh, that might be wrong for you. But don't impose that on me, To each his own, right? It just shows the absurdity. People can talk like that's true. This, hey, whatever's right is up to you. They can talk that way, but they can't live that way because they can't live. It's not a livable system. And then just the other example would be, all right, let's take the roof off of religious belief, when it comes to religious pluralism. Because people are going to say, well, all religions are basically true. You can't say any one religion is more true than another. You can't say any one religion that Christianity is just a true religion. They're all true. Again, how could you show that leads to an absurdity? Well, same kind of thing. You ask, okay, is there anything about that view that leads to an absurdity? Well, let's just take one subject, Jesus and the three monotheistic religions, right? Christianity teaches that Jesus is the Son of God, right? But Islam teaches he's not the Son of God, he's just a prophet. And in Judaism, he's not a prophet, he's just a mere human being. So how can all religions be equally true when they all say mutually contradictory things about just Jesus, right? At least it's an absurdity to say they're all true because they contradict one another, So again, that's just an example of how you can take this tactic, taking the roof off, which again, all of you already know, and apply it to relativism, either expressed as moral relativism with morality or with religious pluralism, okay? So, yes, what we know then to be true, just summary is, yes, there is a God, which we know, and that God has a standard of morality, and of course we've violated that standard, which is why we believe that there is sin, which is a real thing. Thankfully, though, God offers a pardon, okay? And, of course, that's what the gospel is. The gospel is an opportunity for us who have all committed crimes against God to be pardoned by God for the crimes that we deserve to be punished for. So let's be thankful, though, that there is objective morality, but also that religious pluralism isn't true because the one God who has that standard set up is also the God who's made a way for us to be pardoned. And that's really good news.